And the giveaway is the fact that he died with a microphone in his hand.
Many of us are still grappling with the death of Charlie Kirk, remembered for his fearless willingness to engage with those who disagreed with him. As we process that, in today's video, we will turn to some of Bishop Barron's reflections to help us make sense of what happened and why we need more Catholics to rise up and do what Charlie Kirk did. To begin, in the first clip, Bishop Barron explains the significance of how Charlie Kirk was killed while holding nothing more than a microphone in his hand. Let's listen.
I think what it is in his murder, we felt shaking something fundamental in our society. And the giveaway is the fact that he died with a microphone in his hand. What I mean is not a gun in his hand, not a knife in his hand, not a grenade in his hand, but with an instrument of communication in his hand. In witnessing that, whether consciously or not, I think we understand something fundamental is endangered. You know, watch him in action. A lot of people are opining about Charlie Kirk. Watch him, YouTube, there's thousands of videos. He liked to go to campuses, fairly hostile places to people with a conservative mindset. But he'd go there and he would express his point of view. Then he had him a microphone and he'd say, come on up and argue with me. Come up and debate with me. Prove me wrong. And that's exactly what he was doing the day he died. He was speaking with someone more liberally minded, and in the very act of doing that, he was murdered.
As Bishop Barron observes, it's chilling to realize that Charlie Kirk was murdered for nothing more than talking with people and debating ideas. He was exercising the very freedom of dialogue that should define a civilized society. But what makes this even more striking and deeply ironic is the comparison to the first century. In the first century, St. Paul could challenge Caesar himself and still live to preach another day. But in our so-called free society, Charlie Kirk was gunned down simply arguing ideas with college students. That's the bitter irony. We haven't advanced in tolerance. We have regressed into an age where words are treated as weapons and dialogue is punished with death. In the next clip, Bishop Barron reflects on how Charlie Kirk stood in the tradition of Aristotle, Plato, and St. Thomas Aquinas, courageously engaging opponents in the pursuit of truth. Let's listen.
Go all the way back to the man who in some ways is the founder of the Western intellectual tradition, Socrates. Socrates rarely gave lectures or speeches. What he did is he went in the streets and byways of Athens and he encountered mostly young people and he would ask them questions. Then he would question the answers they gave him. He would probe and he would push and cajole and he'd ask people to draw out the implications of what they believed. And in this lively back and forth, he felt he was coming closer to the truth. His greatest disciple, Plato, gave us in his famous dialogues just a kind of literary version of these Socratic conversations. Aristotle, Plato's greatest disciple, had a school called peripatetic because people walked around together, conversing, and in the conversation they came closer, they thought, to the truth. Draw a straight line from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all the way to Oxford and Cambridge, where the principal method of teaching is not the lecture, but the conversation between tutor and pupil. That's the Athens side, if you want. The other great formative influence on our Western culture, the Jerusalem side. We can find much the same thing. If you're in a Jewish context and you're seeking truth, you don't listen to lectures so much, but rather two interlocutors sit apart across from each other with the scripture or the Talmud in between, and they argue and debate and they question, they cajole, they criticize, and they attend to conversations from long ago where people centuries before were doing exactly the same thing. In the lively give and take, they come closer to the truth.
Socrates asked questions because he knew that wisdom begins with admitting ignorance. His method exposed hidden assumptions, challenged contradictions, and led people beyond opinions toward clarity, humility, and true wisdom. And here is the striking part. Socrates was hated and killed for the very same reason Charlie Kirk was. He asked too many uncomfortable questions. In 399 BC, the state of Athens put him on trial, charging him with impiety and corrupting the youth, and sentenced him to death. It seems like whether before Christ or after Christ, people in power have always feared and silenced those who dare to seek the truth out loud. In the next clip, Bishop Barron shows how both Athens and Jerusalem, through figures like Socrates and St. Paul, handed down to us the understanding of one of the most fundamental rights, which is the freedom of speech, and explains how this legacy was later taken up and enshrined by the founding fathers of America. Let's listen.
Well, both Athens and Jerusalem contributed, it seems to me, to our founding fathers in the 18th century, who gave us precisely a political ethos based upon lively public exchange, debate, conversation, all predicated upon freedom of speech. It's very deep in the Western consciousness that kind of public discourse is a good thing. And it's an antidote to violence. Something I love that Charlie Kirk used to say. He'd be challenged by a kid who would say, "What are you doing here on campus? Why are you here?" He would say, when people stop talking to each other, bad things happen. When people in a relationship stop talking, divorce happens. When a society stops talking, civil war happens. Quite right, it seems to me. And that stretches right back to Socrates and provides a foundation for our society.
That is so true. When people stop talking with each other, violence is never far behind, which is why freedom of speech is so important if we want to prevent bloodshed. The Bible gives us sobering reminders of this. Cain never spoke to Abel about his jealousy. Instead of bringing his anger into dialogue with God or his brother, he let it fester until it erupted in the first murder. Joseph's brothers could not speak a kind word to him, and their silence and resentment hardened into betrayal, selling him into slavery. Even King Saul, rather than dealing honestly with David about his fears, let envy consume him until he picked up a spear and tried to kill him. Scripture is clear. When dialogue breaks down, violence takes place. In the final clip, Bishop Barron shows that having a conversation with someone you disagree rests on two important foundations. First, recognizing the dignity of the other person, and second, seeking the truth together. Let's listen.
What are the assumptions behind this conversational model of truth? Two, it seems to me. First of all, a profound respect for the dignity of the individual human being. Look, if I don't have that respect for the dignity of the individual and I want to find consensus in my society, all I got to do is seize power and then imprison, torture, or at the limit, kill my opponents. You think that's a wildly unrealistic scenario? Think again. In my lifetime, certainly in the lifetime of my parents, this was practiced on a massive scale all over the world. When you stop believing in the dignity of the individual, violence takes the place of real conversation. The second great assumption, I think, is some sense of shared context of meaning. What I mean are values, both epistemic and moral, that condition the conversation. If we agree on this fundamental context, then we can have a real argument. I can say, no, you're not honoring it sufficiently, or no, you're not seeing the right implication, or no, you're now in contradiction to it. But if we don't share that common view, it's a bit like kids going to play baseball and each one making up their rules. So when I hit the ball, I can run directly to second base. Well, then baseball ceases to exist, and what ensues is bickering and violence.
In conclusion, I would like to close with the words of St. Pope John Paul II. He said, "Faith and reason are like two wings of the human spirit, lifting us towards the contemplation of truth." I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.